Testing. Can you hear me? Can you do me a favor? Can you test? Can you see if you can hear me on the live stream? If you could go outside real quick. Testing, testing. Hey guys, welcome to Wayfair today. How you doing? Sorry for the wait. Everything is working smoothly. We'll be up and running in a couple minutes. Anytime, anytime.
Oh, now it's green. Can you hear me? Oh, yes, you can. That's great. I thought you'd like my Jewish accent. Okay. All right, fine. Or a leprechaun, Jewish leprechaun. Welcome, everyone, to the Boston Area Talent Sourcing Association's. Here I am. Welcome, folks, on the live stream, as well as here in the room at Wayfair headquarters in Boston. We are excited to bring the Boston Area Talent Sourcing Association back here for our last event of 2019. We've got an exciting presentation followed by a panel all about CPC, programmatic, sponsored advertising, all the stuff that sourcers probably should know more about and don't know that much. So we're going to answer all your questions today and give you a big jump start on what we are quite confident will be an important area for sourcers and recruitment marketers to know about in the 2020s. So we're going to start off with our intro presentation that will give you a good sense of the concepts that we'll be talking about in the panel, and that will be led by Leah Daniels. Woo! At Appcast. So I'll let her do a better introduction of herself. We've known her for a long time and very happy that she can be here today, and we'll introduce our panel after she's done with her presentation.
Good. Testing.
Sir. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. Not sound like I'm heavy breathing anymore. All right. My tech support days are still a little rusty, so hang on one second as we switch back over to that deck. Well, the deck we had up a minute ago. There it is. Oh, perfect. And we're gonna hit. Oh, hey. One more time. No, stop that. Okay. Let's try again. Hi, everybody. My name's Leah. I have been in this industry for 20 years and want to talk to you a little bit about what this programmatic thing is. My favorite is folks call it the programmatic. Julie, back me up. Is that not your favorite term? So we're going to cover what the programmatic is, along with all the buzzword bingo that is recruitment marketing. It's a pretty complicated little space that has exploded in the last couple of years. Before I was doing strategy here for Appcast, I ran their software business. And the software business mostly worked with very large buyers in the US market. When we think of a large buyer of the US market, we're talking about candidates. We're talking about the largest job boards who buy from each other, just in case you guys didn't know. And our big gig companies, ad agencies, so the recruitment ad agencies that you guys probably worked with, RPOs, big staffing firms. So some of these really big organizations and bigger than any singular brand name company that you might think of. Before that, I spent 9 months, 2 days at my friends at Monster. They were excited to have me. Before that, I spent about 5 years at Bullhorn working with their partnerships, APIs, integrations, M&A, that kind of exciting stuff. And then I spent a whole 10 years at a company called ZoomInfo in town, which is a data company. So I tend to play in the recruiting and data space, which, fun fact, I'm fairly certain, and I won't mention the year, I met Mr. Glenn over here in my days at ZoomInfo, the first half. Oh, please tell me something technology wants to work today. Okay. 2 seconds about Appcast. Just for those of you who don't know who we are, we've been around since 2014. We were acquired earlier this year by a company called Stepstone, which is a large German job board. They are owned by a company called Axel Springer, which is one of the largest media companies in the world. Do you like my German? I've been working on that. As I mentioned, we work with some of the largest employers in the US market to help optimize what they're doing with jobs. And when we talk about optimize, what we really mean is figure out how to get candidates. It's kind of the key there. And these are some companies we work with. It's my favorite NASCAR slide. So what are we going to do today? How did we get here? Probably a good question. I always talk about recruiting as the path has been paved in gold. We just need to follow it. It's the marketing people who've already figured it out. So we already know sort of where we're headed. We have our own flavor of it. We have our own variation, and we tend to be a slow adopter of this newer technology. So I want to talk about what has happened and how we got to where we're at, and why our point of view from a recruiting perspective is slightly different than a marketer's point of view. Anybody in here in the recruiting space? Oh, sorry, I'm highly interactive and I will force you to participate. So yay for you. Anyone work in a recruiting department who hired a marketer? You're like, this is a great idea. Let's hire a marketer. They're going to help us. Anybody do that? Yeah. It's kind of a double-edged sword. In some ways, you're like, some of your ideas are great. And then you're like, why did they fail? Because a lot of times we're working on an infrastructure that's very different in the recruiting space than the marketing space. And so everything we try to steal from the marketing world, we need to add our own flavor to. Let's talk a little bit about what this pay for performance thing is. Let's give you some secrets on the job board market. Let's talk about what this war for talent looks like. And then we'll talk a bit about the programmatic. And then following that, Julie and Alex, maybe Elliot, maybe not Elliot, we're not sure. Just Alex, the best ladies in the industry right here, are going to help you guys understand a little bit more about what this programmatic thing is. I did not send you the list of questions. Julie, can you just invite him to the questions on the thing? Thank you. All right, let's talk about traditional media. This is my favorite quote. All right, if you're old like me, you remember it. Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. Okay, go back here for a second. Traditional media. Your job boards roll in. They say, it's December. 40% of the revenue from a job board is signed in December. They make 40% of their money right now, this month, because they are very good at convincing you that you need to tell them with your crystal ball what you need to do for the next year and sign a contract and agree to it. You're going to spend $5 billion with them next year. They're really excited about it. That's how this traditional media started. It started because Monster was like, oh, we can lift and shift the newspaper model right onto the web. Paper posting, all jobs are the same, $350, have a nice day, tell me how many you want. The problem is, back to my friend John here, and I had folks at Monster say this to me, it's advertising. Sometimes you get candidates, sometimes you don't. It's not up to us, it's up to the candidates. No, Monster, it's up to you because you decide which jobs to show. It is actually up to you. They choose to allow free market forces for them to not necessarily send you candidates anywhere you want them to. What does that mean? It means you need to spend more money with them to get more candidates for the jobs you didn't get candidates on the first batch. See, this is brilliant. They love it. Then along comes my friends at Indeed, and they were like, I got a solution to this problem. Right? Only spend for jobs that you get something for. So we move into this world of acronyms that show really, really fast. Cost per click, cost per apply click, cost per lead, cost per apply, CPC, PPC, CPM, all these fun words, right? This is the introduction of marketing vernacular into the recruiting space. So CPM was the sort of the highest level, right? It's cost per million leads, or 1,000 leads actually. But anyway, you get a price point and you get a bunch of leads, except they're not really leads, they're views. They're not people you can actually touch and hold and feel. And so you start to work down the funnel, and that's what marketing has done, which you get to things like cost per lead or cost per apply. The buzzword bingo got bigger, there's more and more things, there's more and more letters. But at the end of the day, there's really two things happening. You either buy what we call traditional media, which are these pay-for postings or even slots, which you can actually do some optimizing on, or you pay for a performance metric. And if you do that, you're looking to do some things to create optimization in your process. Pay for performance can help solve a few things. First of all, you only pay for people that interact with your job. So that's nice. You stop with those jobs that you paid for, you got nothing. You got clicks though, and not humans necessarily, but definitely at least you're going in the right direction. The second thing that it introduced is variable pricing. So one of the things that's really strange in our market is this idea of supply and demand, right? It's actually not strange, but it's very strange to most buyers, most recruiters. So I can't tell you how many times I'll hear the following statement. Well, I just want an even number of candidates all the time, like peanut butter. I just want them even. And I want to pay the same amount every single time, every month, every week, every day. Okay, but there are different points of the year, different things are happening. So who tries to hire in January? Anybody try to hire in January? Like, it's chaos. Why? Because everybody's budget's open and jobs flood the market. This January is going to be particularly interesting because our unemployment is so low. If you fast forward around October, anybody do the seasonal hiring, retail hiring? Always a good time. Also, supply and demand has changed. So the price point to hire, or not hire, but to find people actually changes with the market depending upon what's happening in the market. And that actually makes sense, except it's really hard to understand and conceptualize. There's no really visualization. Indeed's not like, here, let me show you a visual picture of what's happening so you know what to bid. They're like, don't worry about it, trust me. I'll take care of it for you. It creates this sort of distrust that's happened, but it is real. The supply and demand is real. The next thing it introduced, which I like, is multi-level budgets. So you can actually say, Indeed, stop spending here, spend over there. So allowing you some control over where your money goes. My friend George here came along after my friend John and said the Wanamaker was wrong. The vast majority of advertising is wasted. Not half, it's most. And actually, if you think about it, as a recruiter, as a hiring person, you only need one. You only need one. Now, most of you are saying yes, and then you're saying to yourself, except hiring manager Bob over here is like, I need 10. I got 10. I got choices. You need to give me a slate of candidates. But even if you were to get 10 great candidates per job, you probably still had to get 20, 30, 40, 50 to get to your 10, to get to your 1, right? But his argument, which is good, is that actually everyone but that 1 is wasted advertising. You need to figure out how to get rid of that waste. And part of that is starting to understand what makes a hiring manager say yes. So while we're doing this, our friends at Indeed created a new set of challenges for us, right? So we're wasting some money, that's fun. They have done this nice job of over-inundating you with certain jobs. How many people have a job in which you get 500 applicants? I love that. It's so exciting when I have this one over here with none. And they're like the same job in 2 different locations, right? Why does that happen? So some jobs get all the candidates, some jobs get none. It's like this little piggy went to the marketplace. The variable pricing requires you to understand all this stuff, and then it sort of puts the spotlight on quality. This is my favorite, right? I'm applicant 604. I like to think about the world from a candidate's perspective. I think I said to you earlier, one of my biggest complaints about recruiters is that we think like recruiters. The problem with thinking like a recruiter is that we sometimes forget to think like a candidate. Our friends who are candidates, I think I saw that stat the other day, spend on average 40 minutes doing research. This is a professional space, just to be clear. Our hourly space is a little different. About 40 minutes researching companies and jobs. 40 minutes of your time, of their time. They go to your career site, it's beautiful. You guys did a nice job. You hired whomever you hired, they did a good job. Then they went to Glassdoor. You paid Glassdoor a lot of money. You have good branding. You look great. They see that you're like a 4.2. They really love that. That's exciting. And then they go and they apply for your job. It's only 45 minutes to get through that apply process because there's only a few hurdles that you ask them to do, including your social security number and firstborn. And then voila, they're a candidate. They are number 604. Even with your hiring manager's ridiculous requirements, you never look past number 50, let's be honest. You don't have time. We close out the rec, we get the automated thank you, have a nice day, and we move on. Right? 6 to 12 months later, we'll get around to that part. Maybe if it's an evergreen job, we'll leave it open forever. It'll be really nice. And they'll never get that automated email. And they're really excited about your brand. They may or may not shop with you later. You only need a handful. So this is one of the challenges that we all face now, is that we've actually created this introduction. The data suggests that 6% of your jobs will consume 36% of your applicants. Think about that, sir. 6% of your jobs will consume 36% of your applicants. So that means 50% get none. Hello, anybody want to apply for my job? It's a good job. I did the right things. Why did I get none? Well, there's other problems. There's all these things that go into whether or not you get a candidate. Because even with our unemployment, it is possible to get candidates. They're not out there. You just have to be really good at figuring out how to get to the top of the stack. So these things all feed into it. The title you use. Anyone here from Subway sandwiches? Subway, everyone makes fun of a little bit. They tried to use sandwich artist for a while for their title. It did not do well on the hit rate for job sites because candidates don't type in sandwich artist and no job site knows how to normalize that. And here we are, right? Titles matter. Location matters. What you pay matters. Experience you're asking for matters. Education matters. And these things all factor in to how much it costs for you to acquire clicks or candidates on various pay-for-performance sites. These things all feed in. Then, as I was mentioning before, the supply and demand kicks in. So there's a lot of pieces here that all feed into the cost that actually you have to consume. What's not in here is also your ATS. Your apply process matters. Also not on here, how long it takes you to respond. Right? The death of candidates is taking 30 to 45 days to pick up the phone and say, hi, I saw you apply for my job and I really like you. And they say, that's nice, somebody else already called. And I took that job. Or I forgot about you because I applied to 45 jobs because I had to in order to get one of you to call me back. So many things go into this. So these things all matter and how much it costs you as a business, right? I like to think about this as a continuum, right? So when we talk about cost, most of the time, job sites you're talking to focus on this: posting, clicks, applies. Clicks and applies, apply clicks are and applies even are the measurable. I call them their revenue models. This is how these companies make money. It's their revenue model, right? But you really want to be here. You want to get them, I think, here anyway. Julie, I don't know what you think, but I think interview is the right place because that is my definition of quality. I think a job board is actually not responsible for your hire. That's your responsibility. That's why you guys have jobs. You're great. But I think job boards are supposed to get you hireable candidates. That's their job, not just bodies. That's not good enough. People that you can hire, the 10 your hiring manager wants, even though the 10 is probably unnecessary. That's the job, right? And pay for performance is moving down this spectrum, right? And we're seeing more and more. In fact, I actually saw a job site come out and say that their cost per hire. Curious how that all works out in the end, but we'll see. The big challenge, though, from your side is that the ecosystem has exploded. Career Builder pushed out an article, I'm not sure I believe it, but the average job seeker, so somebody actively involved in the process, will visit 16 sites. I don't believe that, but I do believe is that they will see 16 different emails in their inbox of job alerts suggesting that, right? Most candidates that you interact with will come from either a real-time search off of Indeed or Google or from an email alert in their inbox. That's the majority of candidates. It's really those two methods. So if you look at how many of the sites there's, you guys, no one in this room wants to talk to this many job boards. I don't even want to talk to this many job boards, and I think I have. It's too much to wrangle. It's too many to think about. It's too much to figure out, right? So this has become a real problem. You have an open job. This is reality. How do you make the job market work? Work for you and not against you, right? And this is part of the challenge that you will have as you face this unemployment going into next year. This is June data, but obviously, as you all know, this gap is growing, right? The unemployment rate, we talk about it in percentages, but look at it in numbers. Orange is the number of jobs that are open. Blue is the number of people collecting unemployment. In 2009, so exactly 10 years ago, for every open job on the US market, there were 6 people collecting unemployment for that job. Think about that, 10 years ago. For every open job, there were 6 people collecting unemployment. That didn't even talk about all the people who were thinking about moving and all that good stuff, right? The job market's changed. One of my favorite things about looking at companies' websites and their career sites is that they haven't. Same number of questions. Like, oh, I don't want to talk to you. How many questions can I put in front of you? Bad news, it's going to get worse. Even if we hit a downturn, if it's soft, if it's not soft, depending on the economists you talk to, it could be any of those things. This is what's happening. There is actually, you can't see it, but there's this really nice arrow behind here that's going up. In the next 10 years, we're going to need 15,000 more healthcare workers, 10,000 more transportation and warehouse workers. Hospitality is going to go up by 61,000 open jobs. This doesn't take into account the number of people retiring. We've got boomers in here retiring. This doesn't take into people who are just leaving the workforce. Right? This is just net new jobs. And there are not net new bodies coming into the workforce to fill this. This is going to be a real struggle. So it's not a war for talent. It is a war for talent. It isn't a war for talent. I don't know, right? The pundits all say it's a war for talent. I hate that. I think it's a race for candidates. You don't actually have to win. You just got to outrun the other guy. Think about that. Look at this. He's like, I got to take a picture of this. Update, this is a fake photo. Everyone, I found out this is not real, but I just love their faces so much on it. It's so good. You got to outrun the other guy, right? You have to outrun your competition. You don't have to win. I think that's a little extreme. You just have to be better than the next guy, right? You have to be better than the people hiring across the street, right? You got to be more efficient. You got to be quicker, but you don't have to win. Just don't get eaten. So let's go back to your ideal candidate. As you know, she's looking for work, which none of them are, but this is, we all live in a fantasy world. If you hire her, business will drive ROI, everything's going to be great. You have a problem. Everyone else wants to meet her too. And the job sites want to help her meet everyone, especially if she's applying to one of those jobs, your 6% of your jobs that are consuming all your candidates. So back to my saga. Programmatic is the concept that makes this stop happening. What it does is it tells the job board that it no longer needs candidates. It's a simple idea that says when you put a job out to market, there is a finite number of humans that you need to get through the apply process or get through the interview process or whatever it might be. And even if you don't shut the job down in your ATS, it just takes it away. It takes the juicy jobs away. And it says, look at job boards. You want to make money? No problem. I got all these other jobs for you to work on. It's a little more complicated because it also takes the money it didn't spend on this one, because I'm sure you guys never thought about, as you got 600 candidates that you paid for every one of those clicks and the 25 clicks it took you to get that one candidate, right? That's all money that's just going out the window. It's taking all that money away from those jobs and it's redistributing it out to the other ones. And often it means you're paying more. You might pay more per click or even more per applicant. But now you're getting applicants and getting clicks that you weren't getting before because it's right sizing the market. Over time, it'll actually take this kind of job and drive the price down. Pay less for the ones that are juicy, pay more for the ones that are hard. Simple concept. It's really hard to do if you are a human, but very easy for software. So how do you get there? Because if you're not first, you're last, right? You have to get to your candidates first, which means those jobs that you had sitting out there, that long group that wasn't getting anything, they're getting older and older and older. The idea is to get money onto them quickly and get them up in front of candidates. So job boards serve up jobs based on a few factors. We were just talking about this before, Randy, right? So job boards care about a couple of things. Location, location, location. They care about the location because candidates don't want to commute 3 hours. I love that this is being recorded, by the way. Who remembers when LinkedIn first sent out their job search engine and they would send you job alerts for San Francisco? Did anyone get these? I used to get jobs like all over the country. I was really excited about that cost to move. It just couldn't figure out how to handle the location piece. They were thinking like good jobs, people will move for them, but most people actually don't want to move. Most people don't relocate. So most of the job boards have focused their efforts on location. So location is sort of the number one driver. The second driver is title keyword match. How close to your title has the candidate typed in that you've got? So the more words you have, the worse your match. The more creativity you have, the worse your match. Third, how old is your job? Age matters. Age matters for a couple of reasons. The big one is every one of the job sites knows they get measured by you on source of hire. Source of hire comes from getting the first candidates in. Being candidate 604 does not help them win source of hire. So they always bump up those ones. The next thing they look at is how much you pay. Pay per price, pay per, even actually some of the bigger sites are now looking at your total contract value. And if you're a big company, you are getting artificial boost, even if it's just a posting site. And then the last thing that they look at is candidate interaction with the job. So how much is the candidates interacting with the job? So all these things go into an algorithm and they spit this out. You want to get the first candidate in, or they want to get the first candidate in, you want to get the first candidates in, and you want to move on. Why does this happen? So I was explaining how the job boards work, but at the end of the day, right, job boards think in terms of source of hire and maximizing candidate experience. Like if you talk to a lot of them, they'll talk about the candidate experience is about this window that's really focused on the candidate's time interacting with a job site. So if you can think about your job, it's getting all this activity, it's because they see that as a good candidate experience. They actually have bought into this, I think, fallacy. Because in my mind, it might be a good candidate experience on their site. It's a pretty bad candidate experience overall, because they're not going to get the hire. They're not going to even get a call back. So that's where the programmatic comes in. So what is programmatic? Starts with a data-driven strategy that takes software, a little math, and a little data, and gets you the programmatic. When we talk about data, it's jobs, it's ATS, right? It's the market conditions, it's the candidates, it's the pricing. It all goes into this concept of data. There are companies out in the market who like to call this AI. I don't know if it's really AI. It looks like a pretty complicated algorithm to me, but let's go with AI, sure. But what good programmatic software does is it improves the process, but it gives you good data for you to continually optimize your own internal process. So one of the things that will come out of a good programmatic software is this idea of you can put more money in the funnel or you can fix things here, right? Your choice. Because the reality is the reality. There are so many candidates in the market. The costs are what they are. If you need more, you have to do one of two things: put more money in or fix things that make your own world more efficient. And part of that's because you work in this environment of job boards that actually have no rules, right? I'm talking about all these like, oh, they use this, they use this, they use this, but they really don't have to do that. They can all do what they want, and they do, right? So how do you get and wrangle all this manually? I don't actually know. I don't know how to do this manually. It requires too much thinking, and that's why software exists. So last couple slides. Programmatic, I think you could take out the word programmatic and overall replace it with this concept of it's a rules-based approach to getting candidates in. One of the things that we find is that companies that implement rules actually bring in more candidates on more jobs, and they free up their sourcers' time to focus on actual hard-to-fill jobs. So you aren't going on the ones that are medium to fill. The job boards can do more work on that, and you can focus your time where it really should be. The rules are actually very flexible overall. You can do things on spend limits, on conversion rates. You can really be flexible about how you approach rules in programmatic software. The key, though, is to figure out what those rules are going to be. And a lot of times that means you're going to try something, test it, see the results, try something else, adjust. Last slide. It's a data-driven engine that enables real-time control and efficiency of your media spend. That is what programmatic at its core is. Creates efficiencies, produces data out the other side. In theory, gives you more candidates across more jobs. Gets for every job. Rules-based buying. Find the right price. This actually is a good one too. It helps you figure out the right price thing. So somebody I was talking to before, I was talking about the NFL cities. Has anybody ever heard this reference? When you look for candidates in NFL cities, it's different than looking for them in baseball cities or AAA cities, right? So NFL cities tend to be more expensive. It's more expensive to find candidates in Boston, San Francisco, New York, Miami. You see where I'm going with this, right? But even in that, there's tiering in that. San Francisco, New York, Chicago, LA are more expensive than second tier cities, than tertiary cities, and so forth. It's impossible to get your head around. If you think about that, jobs by price point, by location, by category, by how many you need, volume matters, right? If you need 300 of these people in Boston tomorrow, it's different than I need 300 of these people over the next 4 months, right? Velocity matters. So this stuff all takes care of that for you. Questions? Perfectly clear or didn't make any sense at all? Could go either way. What's that?
How does it actually work?
So you put some magic juice in the top, then you shake it, and then stuff comes out the bottom. What do you mean by that?
I'm much more hands-on. I want to see what actually.
So the short version is one way or another, this software has to consume the jobs. So the question is, how does this work? How does programmatic work? It has to get the jobs. So jobs can come in through XML feeds, they can come in through APIs, they can come in through everybody's favorite method, scraping. But one way or the other, the software has to get a hold of the jobs. There's generally an ingestion process that will take those jobs and slice them by category or various industry rankings by location, figure out where there's problems, where you can't ingest them. Your jobs are written in French, that's not helpful, that kind of stuff. And then before we get to the next piece, there's a linkage piece. So there has to be some sort of signal that tells the software when good things happen. So one way is through pixel technology, which is just a little JavaScript pixel says, hey, something happened here, which can happen on your career site. That will optimize to an apply, for example. The thing to remember is whatever you choose to optimize to in that spectrum, that continuum, is what the software will always run at. So a lot of times we work with companies, I don't know about you, Julie, but we work with companies, we say, look, put it at the apply and then put it at the interview or put it at the recruiter accepted. Pick one at the optimize and one is the tracking. And then usually we start at the candidate level, like they applied, and then put it at the tracking level of recruiter accepted or interview. And then over time, flip it.
So how does that work?
So right now it's just a signal saying it happened, it happened, it happened. And when the signal comes back into the software and says, hey, the candidate applied or the candidate went to an interview and it came from this website on this day at this time and at this price. It consumes that information, and then over time it's able to start to understand.
But just for clarification, is
Yep.
the ATS is then communicating this back out to Appcast or?
Yep. Yep. So it has to work together. So the ATS with CRM has to allow these signals to come back in. And then in the middle of all of this is software that lets you group those jobs into logical methods, be that by location, by function, by both, by division, by budgets, by whatever makes your world work, and by what makes the candidate world work. So there's sort of a process that most companies have to go through where you have to sort of break your own internal requirements to allow for variations of what's happening in the market. So for example, I may really, really, really want to group companies by division, which is fine, but you may have to then subdivide them in order to accommodate that customer service reps just cost a different amount than warehouse workers, than delivery drivers, than an IT, right, than your data scientists, right? They're all just all different. And so you have to sort of be willing to work within some of the market constraints of what it costs out in the market. Did that help or did I make it worse? It's easier to see, I think, actually in, unfortunately, real life, right, to actually do it. More questions? Organic is a very dying breed right now, but everybody's so hopeful for it. No?
What do you do if you 4 titles.
Well, one is to fix your process. Always a good one. 2, get the lawyers out. Sometimes they're the problem. A lot of times software will allow you to manipulate within the software. So you leave your job on your own ATS as whatever it is you've been told to do. And then the software you can rip and replace. So the candidate loops back to the job. It will be the job you have to have, but what you have out in the market that attracts and what you use in order to drive the matches, you use what actually works. So again, bifurcating the internal stuff from how you go out and advertise. That also, if you can do that, you can start to do A/B testing, which then you can be real marketers. It's very exciting. So you can say, oh, this title works and that one doesn't. Change these words. Don't change those words.
Vowels are important.
What's that?
Vowels are important.
Yeah, usually we tell people use real words. Real words are better. Jargon is bad. Lots of symbols are actually not good. The more exclamation points is not better. Less exclamation points is good. But also just, it's funny if you start to see there's these behaviorals that will creep in. I don't have it in the slide, but that creep in, like we say, like corporate home office. Well, that's fine, but first, no candidate walks on to Indeed and says, corporate home office is the first thing I'm going to type in here. So what you've done is you've actually just created more words that lower the match percentage. So you have to remember, right? Title match is about a match percentage. And the more words you put in, the lower your match percentage right out of the gate. So one of the first things we tell people, 2 to 3 words, 2 to 3 words, 2 to 3 words, try to get to 2 to 3 words. Customer service. If I was a candidate, what would I type in? Not if I was a hiring manager, how do I make Bobby over here feel good about this title that I'm creating? Not that anyone has ever had that conversation, I'm sure. But how do I get a candidate to match my job? And shorter, shorter, shorter.
We've been advised by one of our job board vendors that in countries like Poland, for example, you get a much better click rate if you don't target by metro, but you use the region or even country as the location. So I'm wondering if that kind of behavior could differ by country. Are systems smart enough to be able to post locations differently in your kind of system?
So it depends on the vendor, actually. So I'm going to pick on Indeed for a second because they have a very prescribed method, which is interesting. So Indeed has 2 kinds of Indeed job sites. They have, and forget the US for a second, they have like www.indeed.co.uk, right? They have the country extension on the end. That is a dedicated site to the UK, and location matters. But there's a bunch of them which you'll see, if you notice the URL, actually sits on the US job site itself database, and it will say like Poland.indeed.com or Estonia.indeed.com. For those ones, it actually, the country matters because it's not a closed ecosystem for them. They've sort of bifurcated in their database itself, and it's not quite clean. For most countries, there is some sort of localization that you have to sort of adapt to, but it has more to do with the job site and the infrastructure. So like Poland, I'm going to say it wrong. It's like PRAC, P-R-A-C-J. Yeah, they're a little better. They like regions over like cities because a lot of their people commute in, and so they're trying to get you to reach further because they're trying to have a match. So it's actually more about, again, about that match that they're trying to go for. The US, a lot of the sites are, the bigger sites anyway, are optimized to do micro-targeting. So you can get pretty small in your zip codes, for example, and get good reach that way. Yep.
Is there software that allows you to do programmatic targeting to a number of different sites, or do you have to go site by site?
Yep. So every one of the programmatic software vendors out in the market will allow you to reach a large number of sites. Has a lot to do with any sort of relationship that they've gone through and established with those different sites. It's mostly about getting feedback and signals back in. We can all track click data through. The problem with programmatic is you have to also track spend data. And so getting how much you as a buyer has spent is part of the challenge that has to be solved in the programmatic space. And the thing, it's one of those things that in marketing has been solved by companies like the Trade Desk, who have these real-time APIs that integrate to everyone. The job board world is sort of slow to adopt APIs that allow you to do quick data transfer. So it requires that particular job board to produce some sort of file that the programmatic vendors can consume to understand how much money you as a buyer have spent. So I would say in the US market, there are a couple ways to tackle it. One is if you work with a programmatic vendor, you can generally reach about 100 sites that way. And then if you want to reach more, there are sites like we have one called Exchange, Recruitics has one called Reach, that have gone out and done more brute force relationships to get that data back, and you can just sort of reach out and get a bunch of sites that way. So you've got options on how to do that, but you have to get, a lot of these job boards just have to get through the technology hurdles that they have in front of them.
I'll add to that there's two ways, right? So one, you can license the technology, manage it yourself. I would only advise that if you're sophisticated in programmatic advertising, and there's very few people that exist today in the job space that are, but they're growing. And then the other is to work with an agency or a provider that handles all of that for you. So Appcast and Recruitics, for example, Appcast is very flexible to access programmatic. But I would then classify them as two different things. Whether or not they're transparent with source or it's all consolidated.
Oh, sorry.
For your ears only.
Cool. So should we move? Do you guys want to, do we have a break or do we just go? So I apologize. All the pictures are wrong because we had a little bit of a snafu. I don't know if you guys all sort of got should we give everybody the backstory here of how we got to today, or is it? So our friends at College Recruiter who have so graciously hosted the YouTube channel, had put on this plan for this great event. And last week, unfortunately, Faith Rothberg's father had passed away. So they are not able to come here. They're in Minnesota today. So through a combination of efforts, we have sort of lifted and shifted to make this all work together today. Julie and I are here. Elliot was going to join us, but Alex instead is going to join our panel. Madeline was going to join us, but she could not make it. So we are going to, are you our new, we have a new monitor, sort of.
You can do as much moderating as you want to. That's fine.
Great. I'm going to try to remember those questions that Julie and I wrote last week. And so, ladies, will you join me up here? And I would like, again, please interactive. You guys should ask questions too, especially if we make up things. Why don't I ask the first question though, if you don't mind, Glenn?
Yeah, and this mic is working. Let me see if we can get one more.
Thank you.
You need a mic to yell into.
Testing.
I'm not a yeller.
All
All
right.
right, so I think the first question should be, I just gave 45 minutes of talking. What did I miss, or would you say differently around what is the performance market? What is the programmatic market? The programmatic market. Bonus points if you say that.
So hi, I'm Julie Calli, Chief Strategy Officer at Recruitics.
Even better, you should introduce yourself. I'm so sorry, I'm terrible at this.
That's okay. So I've been doing programmatic for 7 years. Recruitics is actually the company that wrote the first programmatic algorithm. We wrote it because we created analytics for recruitment, and we went and we saw what was happening. Nobody had ever seen job level data before, and when we saw that, we instantly wanted to change the behavior. And it's very data driven. Great job on that presentation, by the way, to explain that. So I'm sorry, the question was the difference between performance marketing.
Oh, should we have Alex? Let's Alex introduce herself.
Yeah, please.
Hi, Alex, join us.
Hi, my name is Alex Monks. I work here at Wayfair. I run growth strategies. So my job here is to look at how can Wayfair continue to hire at 40% growth year over year, with growing more efficiently across advertising as well as our technology stack. And I've been doing programmatic for 6 months, so I'm very new to the market, but I can provide a client side in the journey.
I think that's perfect. All right, so back to the question at hand. How would you characterize programmatic? What would you say differently than what I just said? Where was I right? Where was I wrong? And same thing with performance.
Yeah, no, I think you did a great job on that. Thank you. How would I describe programmatic? Well, it is performance based marketing. So before then, it was post and pray, right? So you buy a job posting, and you would just hope you got candidates. You were not in control of what you get back. So pay for performance is fantastic because you are in control. It gives control. How much do I want to spend? Which jobs are important? Which ones am I willing to spend more on? How many candidates do I need for this job versus that job? And I think you did a great job illustrating the problem, right? Because we would overspend on jobs that we only needed maybe 10 candidates for, and we'd end up with 100. And then in other areas, we're starving. So that's the problem. But what made it even harder is that companies had expectations that recruiters were paying attention to every single job and turning them on and off. And who could do that? Your recruiters are supposed to be on the phone trying to find the right people to hire that fit their culture, not staring at spreadsheets, looking at jobs and should I turn this one on? Should I advertise this one? So this is where technology comes in and can do that for you, right? That there's things that humans should do and there's things that they shouldn't. And the automation is what programmatic is. It's automating it, rule-based, right?
Mhm.
But it's advancing very quickly and it is at the state of machine learning, right? But it still does require human input. So it's not artificial yet. And that is because we have different goals. This is important, right? And then some hiring manager walks in and something else is more important. So there's constant inputs that need to go in it to control exactly what you need to get out. And performance based really gives you a sense of control of that, but it will never solve all of your problems because there are always things that you need to do in addition to performance marketing. You need to provide a great experience. You need to make sure that you're giving a good brand promise, your employer value propositioning. How do you communicate your story to the world? Those things are important too, because war for talent or big bear chasing you, right? That race for candidates, there are other people trying to hire that candidate too. So you do have to compete in the market. So performance marketing can help achieve a great deal of the heavy lifting in areas where you shouldn't have to worry about it, but there will always be an area where you still need to focus. And that's what brings value to sourcing, is that you can focus on the area that you should be focusing on and just let automation take care of everything else. Um,
Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think my thoughts are more from an organization as you're sitting there probably thinking, okay, what does this mean for us and how easy is that to adopt as an organization? And I think that's something that Wayfair has gone on that journey over the last 6 months from going last year, we spent maybe 250K a year on advertising across all of our roles. And that was very fragmented, right? And Wayfair hires almost 8,000 people over the last year. So we're hiring at an extremely quick rate. And so as we've gone on our journey, a big thing has been change management and education and kind of letting recruiters let go of the wheel of driving that advertising forward that maybe they've done at the site level, but then providing kind of data and a streamlined process to be able to run advertising at scale and actually be able to measure, how is different advertising performing across our different markets and roles. As at Wayfair, we hire a wide variety of different roles across a wide variety of markets. And so how it really sheds to light how in one market we may have to allocate a lot more spend in much more harder to fill roles than in other markets. And using this programmatically has allowed us to maybe not spend $50 a day to get 25 candidates, but when we only have to send maybe 70 cents, right? But that was visibility that we didn't have previously to do that. So my advice is kind of as you start on that journey is education and change management in terms of getting your recruiting teams to understand what is a recruiting KPI versus what is a marketing KPI and how you can actually utilize both of those to fix your overall recruiting machine.
That's a great point. I think a lot of companies struggle with the desk level and what you can control and what you can't control, right? We were sort of talking about the titles a minute ago, and the recruiters still own most companies that end title that goes out. But they also oftentimes own which job postings or sites they go to. This one goes to Indeed, this one goes to Career Builder, this one goes wherever. And this is asking them to give up a level of control that they've always had and trust the system. And that is a big part of it. We've worked with companies, I'm sure you have too, who have instituted weekly newsletters about how this change management is going and why it is that it's okay to let the technology make a decision. One of my favorites is an organization that had to institute a you can't go and look at your job on job sites rule anymore, because I'm sure no one in this room has ever gone to a job site to see if it got posted. But it's this habit. It's actually really funny the amount of time recruiters at a lot of organizations spend chasing their job to make sure it made it to the job sites that they posted it on. It's a shocking amount of time. There is this huge leap of faith that I have to trust technology, and I have to trust it while I don't trust my ATS and I don't trust a lot of the other things that I have to work with. But now I have to trust this black box to some degree that's going to decide not only which jobs go out at which price point into where. And I may not easily be able to trace that as an individual recruiter. Somebody operating it could, but the individual recruiter level will not. And so there's a big change management shift there. I think that's a great point, and it's a big pain point in the market.
Right. But there's many people that are skeptics, right?
Oh,
That
for sure.
are hesitant to give up that control. Well, how will I know it goes to the right place? But the truth is how did you know before? The programmatic advertising is running off of data. It is learning. It is seeing the behavior. It understands this job with this skill in this location belongs here. And it is able to make that decision. So if you have a large volume of jobs, or you have 8,000 jobs that you're running, how are you going to make 8,000 individual decisions on any given day? Right. And then there's another component that goes to that. How much should I bid in performance marketing? Right. Now throw that in there. This is where I view programmatic in the recruitment space is in what I would call talent trade value. On any given day, any skill, any market, there is a value to that talent. Now that changes. Talking about
Yep.
peak retail season in October and professional, all the budgets open up in January. This is going on a daily basis for every skill in every market. Depending upon the amount of people who are advertising jobs, that's your competition. How many jobs do you have that you're trying to fill in that location? And then how many people are available, the supply and demand piece.
It actually gets more complicated too. If you over inundate the market with your job, you actually also make it harder for yourself to win candidates. There is actually a point of diminishing returns where you are competing with yourself on certain sites, not all sites, but some sites. And then there's another piece. You guys think this thing's a fad? Is this like not real? It's not a real thing. The mobile device is a huge component now to recruiting. You guys know this. My early data for 2019 suggests that we are going to see over 60% of clicks coming from a mobile device and over 55% of applies. The problem with that is that most companies are under 4% on their conversion rates on their mobile device. So what does that mean? It means it takes a lot more people looking at your job to get one to apply. So when we talk about cost, there's actually a two-factor part of this cost. One is what's the bid price, but the second is how many clicks, therefore the aggregate value of that bid price to get someone to apply. And now, that sort of keeps rolling. If it's a mobile device, you need even more people to click to get to apply. If you are looking for 50 for your hiring manager that wants 10, now keep adding those numbers up and you can start to get to your cost per acquisition for a job, right? So part of this game is to figure out how do you optimize your own internal process in order to lower not your bid price. Your bid price is what the market dictates, but how many of them you need in order to get to a person. That makes sense. Did I make it worse?
No, there's a lot of factors. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing is there's so many different components that need to go in, and how do I advertise my job in the performance space? Humans can't do them. I'm great with math, and I'll tell you, to do it for one job is even a lot. But then when you're trying to do that for volume, it's incredibly large, and to do that on a daily basis. So, I mean, that's what's happening, is that the market is changing every day. Therefore, the value of talent is changing every day. And when you take all of those factors and put them together, you absolutely need automation for that. But this is how programmatic can also work for sourcing. Not only just fulfilling the majority of the jobs and identifying, it helps identify where should I put my time, right? Because good programmatic tech is going to start to flag this job is becoming a challenge. It's been 3 days, no one's clicked on it, no one's applied. That was a great point, right?
Yep.
We love programmatic and pay for performance advertising because you only pay if someone clicks or applies. But what if they don't?
And the software actually listens for non-signals. Like
Right.
that's the piece that I think everyone sort of forgets about is signals come from both it happened as well as nothing
It
happened.
didn't.
It's not happening, right? So good software will kick out a report for you daily, weekly of what's not getting love. Like where's the lack of love? And you can say, look, it's spend more money here, or actually feed my sourcing team these ones because these are the ones I need help with. Don't waste their time with things we don't need to spend their time on. Make sure their time is well spent and in valuable places for the organization.
Right.
Oh, I was just going to say, and we have an example of that we actually saw. We just did a peak season campaign to fill our warehouses and call centers for the upcoming holiday season. And midway through campaign, as I'm sure a lot of high volume employers know, hiring needs shift really, really quickly, especially in the logistics space as freight moves across the US. And so that was something that we saw in our business as halfway through the campaign, everything's planned, everything's going great. And oh my God, hiring needs have shifted. We need something tomorrow to change. And to ask for a large recruiting team of 150 people to pivot really quickly is challenging. But since we are running most of our spend programmatically, we have Recruitics as our agency. We were able to say, hey, here's the hiring need that shifted overnight. We need this pushed out and all these jobs reallocated and rebid out in the market. And we were able to really quickly pivot a large majority of our spend to those new markets and roles immediately and start seeing value really quickly, as all of that software was able to optimize our bidding prices based on our locations and how the needs shifted across, which was really exciting, as that was a capability that we didn't have previously and would have been very difficult to coordinate across 20 sites across the US with different local recruiting teams.
I'd always recommend programmatic advertising first. It's the
You're not
easiest.
biased or
Right?
anything.
No, I'll say why, but because I work across all media, but programmatic first because it's the easiest to control. It is the most cost-effective way to buy, and you can change it on a dime, right? So that's fantastic. But when you see those signals that come out that say there is no activity here, then that helps make decisions to, okay, well, what do I need to do now? Is it sourcing, right? Because sometimes you'll start to see a trend of that non-activity and you'll identify that, wow, people don't know who I am. They don't know that I have a warehouse in this location. So that might trigger the need to then help educate that market of who you are as an employer so that people do start interacting with your jobs because they didn't know you existed before as an employer in their location.
So I often say you shouldn't programmatic one job. I mean, you can, but you shouldn't. And you shouldn't because there is some work involved as the person operating this kind of software to get to this point. Do you have an opinion, Julie, on where the line in the sand is in terms of how big does a company need to be, or how many jobs, or how much pain they're in, budget? What's your point of view on the line? Because there is a line.
Yeah, definitely. I would say the complexity of your business matters, right? So if you have 50 jobs, okay, that's maybe not a lot that you'd see a lot of value. But if you have 50 jobs and you're hiring 100 people against each, okay, maybe now you're going to start to see the value within that. So how many people are you hiring? How many jobs? I think it's got to be more than 50 though. We at Recruitics really think that we bring the most value for people that are doing 500 plus hires a year, that we can bring the most value to that. But there certainly is options for much smaller volume on jobs, but you want to think not just how many jobs do I have, how many hires am I going to make, and what is the complexity of what I do? Because working with a lot of large companies, we know that sometimes budgets belong to different people, right? Somebody gets more, somebody gets less. And how do you then run that through? Like a lot of these vendors won't take 5 different feeds from someone. So you might have to work as one centralized company, but with 5 different stakeholders. So the complexity, I think, matters too.
Yeah, we think about it in terms of the maturity as well of the organization. So a great example of a company that would, of large scale, that could struggle is a franchise organization. So now we're not
Yes.
talking about 5 budgets. We
Oh,
could
that's a
talk
great
about
example.
5,000 budgets, and each one is $50. And they care about this job more than anything, because they do, because it's a franchise organization. It's very hard to run a programmatic approach on that, because part of the gig, in my opinion, is it's the rob Peter to pay Paul, right? I take from the juicy jobs that we're going to spend all your money and I move it over here. But if you start to budget limit these organizations because of the way they're operating, it does become very hard. So I would say some of it's a maturity model around, are you a franchise organization? Are you ready to run change management, right? That's a big question. And do you actually have some idea of your business already? One of my, I was talking to a company the other day, and they gave me a number of hires that they want to make next year. It's over 30,000. And they said it costs us $700 per hire. And I said, okay, great. So you have a budget of $23 million. And they were like, no, we don't. I was like, okay, where did this magic $700 come from? That's the math. I mean, I can do a little math. Well, that's what our cost per hire is. I'm like, are you counting all your recruiter salary? Are you counting the building? What are you counting in your cost per hire? And you start digging in, you start to realize that this company doesn't actually know quite what they're doing yet on that front, because they don't have a $23 million number. They don't even have a $10 million number. So you start going down and you say, okay, then you need to figure out what's important to your business and where your money's going to go. I'm not sure we can help you yet. Like, I'm not sure we can help you yet until you're ready to help yourself. So there is a point where you have to look at your own organization and say, are we ready for this kind of change? And do we know enough about what we're doing? Anyone with an ATS has access to this data. Even bad ATSs have access to this data. It may be a little challenging to get to, but you need to have a good idea of your business. I think that's another piece.
Yeah, and an understanding of how to integrate cost into those metrics, right? Because that's not easy. You can't take the total number of candidates you acquire as a company and divide that by your cost, because you didn't get all those candidates from your advertising. Some of them were referrals. Some knew your brand, went direct to your website, and you didn't pay for that activity. So it's very important to know the difference between what comes for free and what do I need to pay for, and how that cost is applied. So, the organic example, are you organic, that's wonderful, but you don't have any control of that in general. They're going to come and they're probably going to fill all the easy jobs first. And your advertising should be going towards, where do I need to supplement? And that's where that cost comes from, is applying that into your events within your funnel, knowing the difference between what was free and what was not.
Alex, I think when you and I spoke earlier this year, you guys had an incredible idea of your metrics, right? I think you guys are probably further along than a lot of companies. You joined sort of in the swing of that. What was your impression of how much information Wayfair had of their own business in order for you to go through this process?
Yeah, definitely. So I can also say, as a background, I've never worked in TA before taking the job at Wayfair. I was in tech consulting before this. So I was fascinated by the TA space in terms of the amount of data and just complexity. As being, a job seeker before this, I was like, oh, if I just click here, someone will read my application and they'll call me. That's how it works. And now getting on the other side of it, realize it's much, much more complex than that. And there's a lot more data available. So when I came into Wayfair, we were on this journey of looking at, how do we optimize our hiring channel mix? So how do we optimize across inbound, outbound, agency, referral, and at Wayfair, especially internal mobility, as we have a large degree of that here. And so as we started to index against that, we were saying, okay, now if we look across the 10,000 people we're looking to hire next year, what percentage of people can we hire across those different hiring channels? And then we laser focused in on inbound. How can we make our inbound more efficient? What percentage of our hires across, we hire everyone from a warehouse worker to a data scientist, across those different profiles, what is the amount of inbound applicants that we can get from, like we were saying, organic traffic, things that we can just post on Indeed for free, really easy jobs. But then what are some of those other jobs that are harder, that we can't do it just by posting and praying anymore, or even, posting and bidding on a recruiter by recruiter basis. So we started to layer into those analytics and say, okay, based on the number of hires that we need to make this year across across these profiles, what is like our app to hire efficacy? How is that panning across? And then back into, okay, what percentage of that can we drive against free traffic versus things that we have to pay for programmatically? And that's we started to narrow and kind of box into, okay, so in order to make X number of hires, we need this many applicants, and to advertise in these really competitive markets, we probably need to have a budget of Y, right? And so that's how we started to look at that as we go across. And it was, I know Leah alluded to this earlier, but this was a very much like a test and see what worked and what didn't work, and adjust along the way. As now we have a lot of that benchmark data. So as we go into peak season next year, we'll have a lot better of an estimation in terms of what is working in specific markets and what's not working for Wayfair or just markets at general.
We talk a lot about adaptive recruiting. I don't know if you guys have adopted this concept in your businesses. In my sort of, if you think a couple of years ago, adaptive recruiting was, can I swear? Am I allowed to swear? No? Okay. Oh shit,
Live.
I don't have any candidates. Do something, right? And everybody freaks out. That was adaptive recruiting. Now it's about having a plan and saying, how are we doing against the plan? And we need to adjust. We need to adjust the plan. It's much more like, kumbaya, it's going to be okay, everybody. It's like very Bill Belichick about it. Like, it's fine. Another season next year. We're going to be great. We'll hire our 5th kicker. It's really about how do you take your plan, see how you're doing, what are your benchmarks, what's your data telling you you're going to do, and adjust the plan, as opposed to individually allowing your recruiters to panic, right? Because that has been how recruiting has often worked. And that panic almost always stems from a hiring manager who's in a full panic, right? And so it's really about culture change and change management to get everyone to get the benchmarks, get the data, right? There's so much data that can tell you this percentage of your jobs are just, I don't know which jobs they are today. I can't tell you. I can't say it's that one and that one and that one. But overall, the numbers say this is going to be fine. This is going to be a little harder. We'll spend some money. This is going to be really hard. We need people to go help us, right? And we just sort of need to figure out what those numbers look like, and let the software take it all, make those decisions, and then kick out the ones that need to go into the appropriate buckets.
Yeah, I can touch on that a little bit as well. I think that was something that we saw, especially in terms of like proactiveness. That's something that we saw with our peak season campaign this year. One of our key markets that we focused on was Northern Kentucky. For those who aren't super familiar with logistics, it's one of the tightest markets, as you can get pretty much anywhere in the continental US in 2 business days driving. And so every logistics distribution company on the planet, it feels like, has a warehouse in Northern Kentucky. And so that was something that, as one of our key markets for this campaign, as we were looking at our programmatic bidding, was, okay, how can we get those competitive warehouse workers in our warehouses, and how can we staff that? And so we took a very proactive approach of planning, okay, we know that we need to pace faster than our competition, and that just
Outrun the bear.
right,
just have to
exactly.
outrun the
We had to outrun
bear.
the bear, and this was the first time that, and outrunning a very big bear called Amazon. And so, and looking at how this was the first time that we've ever actually staffed our warehouses at capacity before a peak season before. It had never been accomplished before. So it was something that through programmatic bidding, we were able to accomplish, getting enough people in our warehouses to staff successfully for the holiday season, which was super, super exciting, and was able to allow us to get out ahead of the curve as opposed to trying to play catch up.
Before we continue, does anyone have questions? Yes.
So how as an individual contributor do you take this overall idea and implement it? Or is it something that a whole company's process needs to look at and change in order to implement?
I feel like I don't have quite enough information. How big of an organization?
Well, it's an individual contributor. I'm not a manager. I'm not making management decisions. I'm not going to choose to make a program.
No, but I guess the question I'm asking is,
Yeah.
do you have access to people who can help you, or are you sort of going to be rallying up the chain? It could take a while. Part of it is because to some degree, there has to be as I mentioned, we were talking about, there has to be sort of a line in the sand. There needs to be a certain number of jobs that are being managed overall, or hires that are being managed overall. And as an individual contributor, it's probably not you alone. It's going to be at least a team, if not a broader team involved.
That was what I was asking around the question. Was it something that individual contributor is able to apply to their own desk to make their own process better?
There's certain things you can do for sure. So I'm sorry, I'm going to do a little plug. Is that okay?
No, go ahead.
We produce a benchmark report. It's on our website, just appcast.io, and you'll navigate somewhere.
That's a
and
great
find it.
report, by the way.
Yeah, everybody loves it. It's very exciting.
Use it daily.
Or I can send it to you, Glenn, and you can send it out. And then we'll produce another one early next year, which will have the 2019 data. But it will tell you, it tells you sort of like market rates. And the reason we can do this, just so we're all on the same page, is we have so much information of the U.S. marketplace in terms of what people are bidding per industry, CPCs, what those are looking like from a CPA, how much the traffic is mobile. But for you specifically, some of the data in there are things that are really interesting, like title information, how to shorten your titles, what they should look like, Glassdoor ratings and how your Glassdoor rating impacts your ability to get more candidates. And by the way, if everybody has options to do this, if you have a survey that you send out to your new employees at like week 6 or 12 or whatever, and you don't have at the bottom, love working here, rate us on Glassdoor, click here, you're missing out on a great opportunity to help your Glassdoor rating.
And help yourself when they research your company.
Yes,
It
it's
helps make it feel
self-fulfilling
easier for
prophecy.
your job.
Everybody should try to do that. The last thing that's really helpful is understanding the days of the week that your candidates apply for jobs. This sounds silly, so I was talking about those weights. One of the things you want to do is you want to align the majority of your candidate traffic to the days you post your jobs. Because again, I said those jobs that are newer get a lift in the job sites. So in the professional space, the majority of people apply on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. It's the Monday midday blues. Everybody knows about it. It's noon on Monday. I'm going to apply for a job. That's in the professional space. In the hourly space, it looks a little differently. So you'll want to adjust if you're looking for hourly employees. Nurses, for example, tend to apply on Saturdays. So the reason I say this is if you are a professional and you're looking for candidates on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, push your job Sunday night or early Monday morning, and they'll get to the top of the page. If you're looking for nurses, Friday afternoon is a great time to push your job, right? You want to adjust based on your candidate behavior. Again, this is separating internal behavior from external behavior. And so sometimes it's like I see this hospitals all the time post on Mondays because, or post on Tuesday or whatever day it was convenient, but the nurses aren't coming till Saturday. So the hospitals posting on the Friday afternoon are the ones winning those nurse candidates. With a 2.5% unemployment rate, you want to be at the top of the list.
And it's hard to sway people's opinion, right? To get involved in this game. We know that at Recruitics, right? We were trying to create a whole new industry out of nowhere. So what, Recruitics, another shameful plug terribly here, but we do offer analytics for free. It will show the event data. It doesn't include the cost, so being transparent of that. But we do that because we know that people don't know where the problems are. So when you put analytics in place and you go and you show your leadership that works in talent acquisition what is going on, it is eye-opening, and that's usually what causes them to take a greater interest. So it is something you could always carry in and say, I heard that Recruitics has free analytics. They install it and then they can see what's going on, and then that is your data. However you want to execute it, whatever source you go and work with, or programmatic technology you use, it's a great way to get a baseline of how will this make a difference for my company, and having the data to tell that.
Cool.
Thank
You thought it was a small question.
Well, yeah, just like I said, as an individual contributor, of these events and everything that we've done so far, it really helped push where I've taken my own skill and how I've taken my own desk. So trying to find that connection,
Yeah.
especially when you're hearing about a bigger picture item, sometimes is a harder way just to connect it back to it.
So I would say right now, the easiest thing for you to execute, like we said, is that very simple stuff. What we're doing titles, benefits, the benefits that you put into the job description matter. The more benefits you list, actually, the higher the conversion rate. So these little things actually add up. But I think over time, it's really about convincing a broader organization.
Awesome, thank you.
I think you had a question.
Yeah, so I think you guys had mentioned the system that has to learn and observe your data. How long is that adoption period?
So I can reveal what we do. So in order to start and go fast, we first assume based on your ATS a bunch of information. So ATSs all matter as well in terms of conversion rates. Certain ATSs convert higher than others, both on the mobile device and on the desktop. So we use that information to get going faster. We really encourage companies to do a 2-week baseline.
I'd agree with that.
Because if you don't baseline, how do you know if you got better? And by the way, it's the hardest thing in the world to do because there's buttons and you want to push them so badly. Like, I just want to push the button. It's like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory, like, let me push the button. But it's really important to try to baseline, and 2 weeks is what we recommend as the minimum. If I could get everybody to do 4 weeks, I would, but 2 weeks is definitely where you should at minimum start. Also, those 2 weeks should not be the last 2 weeks of December, the first 2 weeks of January, right as peak season starts. Like, it should just be in like a normal time. Not that there's ever normal time, but try to find a normal time.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Did you guys baselined a little bit or no? No, you
You-
pushed the button.
Yeah,
You did.
we
You
pushed the button.
I can tell. I can see you pushed
But
the
we
button.
also had a lot more, I think, historical data that we could leverage that provided us like the background base layer that we had for 6 to 8 months leading into this that allowed us to take a more of a shotgun start. And that was just due to timing of when the peak campaign had to launch. But we had some other baseline metrics we could use.
Yeah. And I mentioned adaptive. We really encourage that. So do your 2 weeks, go. Whatever you're going, it has to be against a plan, right? Going isn't just like run crazy. It's these are our goals, these are our plans, this is what we want to try to accomplish. Once you have some data, following those first 2 weeks, maybe it's 4 weeks, maybe it's 8 weeks, you have to adapt. You have to say, oh, actually our goals can change now because we've created a bunch of efficiencies. So I know when we work with large scale buyers out in the market, right out of the gate, we create about a 10% lift in what you get out the other side just by getting rid of what I call clickbait jobs. So clickbait jobs are ones that generate lots of clicks. It's lovely. They spend a lot of money. They generate nothing for applications. It's often too late for you to realize that it happened because it happened overnight. And yes, no, those were probably bots or they were definitely in Romania, but you know what? You're paying for them. So that's nice, right? You want something to stop that behavior quickly. And a human won't be able to catch it fast enough. So even things like that, there's usually 10% savings or just efficiency savings if you can just kick out those clickbait jobs right out of the gate.
I don't know if I'm going out of order, but it seems like the conversation's been very focused on job board buy optimization. I'm wondering if you're going to talk about using Facebook, for example.
Ooh, I can tackle that if you don't want to.
No, happy to speak to that. So I always say programmatic first, right? Because that's going to flush out the areas that you need to focus on. And that's where you might need to influence a certain type of audience. Well, this is good. Now you know exactly what skill and exactly what market, right? Because you can't advertise to the whole country for every skill. That's very expensive. So you know exactly what you need. Now you have a targeted audience. So you launch targeted advertising, Facebook, Google. Even LinkedIn offers a lot of different types of targeted advertising. So you can go after a certain skill in a certain market, people willing to relocate. So then you now have some of that media can get more expensive. It does also require a different approach. It's very hard to launch that on a large scale using your jobs only. So in those cases, you might want to make sure you're having a better experience. People are used to being on Facebook or being on Google and just clicking a button and moving on. So this is where CRM comes into play. I think there was some conversation around that in the cocktail hour, but this is where I would call a contact management system. This is the belief that you would launch targeted advertising, making it very easy for someone to engage with your brand and say, yeah, you know what, I'm interested. But then you have a responsibility to then encourage them to become an application. They are not in application mode typically when you're targeting them out there on the internet. They're probably doing something else and they saw your ad and they saw your opportunity. Oh, yeah, click. You have to keep very low barriers for them and then entice them to come in and apply. So that's where CRM has started coming into the world. When 10 years ago, we had 6 unemployed candidates for every job, people were looking for jobs. They're not now. They're not. They're already working somewhere. So would be my advice on that, to how to launch that stuff, is to identify those skills and markets. Facebook and Google are in the job space. So neither one of them have made it easy for very large scale buying right now, but they are definitely both in a very recruiter type space of that. So you can go on Facebook Marketplace, for example, and post a job. But then there's also this expectation that you will also in Facebook interact with that candidate, because they're not going to let them leave Facebook.
So yeah, so Facebook has, some of you guys probably know this, have a couple of different streams in which you can attack if you're looking to find folks from that particular audience. And, when we think about these large sources of candidates, any way you look at it, it's all audience first, right? Google, it's audience first, depending upon which stat you look at, 40% of job seekers start at Google. Some people say it's 44. Anyway, Facebook has a very large audience, as does LinkedIn, as a few of these other ones. Facebook has created these streams. So one of the streams is your corporate page, in which you can have almost like a little mini job board attached to it. My friends that work for labs have spent a lot of time trying to optimize and make that work as well as it's going to work. And that's really for people who are like, oh, I want to look there and see if I have a job. Most people, to Julie's point, are not on Facebook in job mode. And that's actually one of the challenges, right? So they're not in job mode. So then there was the just standard advertising. So this is where I mentioned CPM, where you can buy X number of views. And I believe in Facebook, it's like person has to watch your video or see your ad for more than 2 seconds, and then they charge you for that. And what you're trying to do then is really broad strokes. Like a lot of employer branding will come through this method. So even if you can target people, you say, look, I want people who have these characteristics. Please keep in mind, most people's information on Facebook on their job information is fairly out of date. The last time I think they did a big push on that, they were working with a company called Branch Out. Do you remember Branch Out? Yeah, it came, it went. It was lovely.
I missed it.
No, they bought that guy's previous company, which was called like Tickle, I think, which was a shockingly large amount of money that they paid for that thing. Anyway, but I don't think they bought Branch Out. Somebody else did. Tom, do you remember? LinkedIn? No, LinkedIn didn't buy Branch Out. No, Bob's saying no. I'm not sure it actually got acquired. Anyway, so they did a big push when they partnered up with Branch Out and got everybody to fill in their employment data. Not everybody, some people did. And sorry. And then it's been stagnant for years now. So that hasn't been updated for most people. So your targeting is going to be out of date. So you're looking for broad strokes. I'm looking for people who generally are technical analysts or generally are bus drivers, things like that. And then you can do a nice, very pretty ad. So you'll need to collaborate with either an agency or your marketing partners to get a nice ad. You can push that out. People interact with that. They can click out on that to land somewhere else. And then from that, you can push them through your apply process. But the challenge with that method is, again, you're looking at people who are generally not in the mode of recruiting. Now, the last option is they are playing with this idea of jobs. It was originally an SMB approach, so they were looking to do like the one-offs, like I need a cook in my restaurant and I'm a family-owned business, or I need a hairdresser in my hair salon. They're carefully walking forward, but there's still some work to do. I know my friends at eQuest probably have more information on that than anyone else on how to work with the Facebook marketplace. The last thing I was going to say with all of that is with LinkedIn as well, there is this kind of Me Too audience targeting that they can all do. What that is you can say, look, this is what I'm looking for, or this is a set of cookies that I already own. Target people whenever they're on your site and they either have my cookie or they're on your site and you have a cookie on them that looks like they have the same behavioral characteristics as someone else I'm looking for. But again, you'll need a nice display ad. If you have a display ad, it's not one ad, it's many ads, because you have to be able to adapt to different options on their site. There's banner here, side one here, videos, not videos, whatever it might be. So this isn't a small project. Sorry, that was a long way to say it's not a small project.
Right, because when you start getting into the targeted advertising world, that's it. You have to speak to the audience that you're targeting. So that often means unique ads, unique content that speaks to that audience, because you're trying to capture their attention. You're putting the money there to bring them to you. You have to speak to them, or it's all just noise and it's ignored.
It needs to be a big group of people that you need to. If you're looking, don't do this for one hire. Right, this is, I need to make 8,000 hires in the next 3 months in these 2 locations, like broad strokes. And the requirements of these people have to be fairly broad as well. Like if you're looking for a PhD with experience at NASA, even if you need 300 of them, it's still probably not a good use of your effort.
Yeah, because it's a high effort to launch something like that, and to manage it. It often requires subject matter expert to manage some of that media. So that's why recruitment doesn't play there a lot, but it's starting to for the large scale pieces. We are seeing Google and Facebook, right, entering the job space. There currently isn't a way to go sponsor jobs with either of them, but they'll be there soon. So but one trend I think that's important to be aware of too, that impacts recruiting, is that the big boys, all the big boys, where the majority of the candidates come from, uh, they don't want the candidate to ever leave their environment. So your ATS will have a shelf life. So that's very important because we're very dependent on ATS in the recruitment process. But when it is a job seeker world, um, and job seekers are so valuable, the places in which they work have these incredible user experiences that are designed to make it very easy for people to apply to lots of jobs and enjoy that experience. They're not going to let them leave and go to your ATS in the future. So how are people going to, I mean, we solved, right? Like high five to us with programmatic. We solved. I loved that slide you had with all of those vendors that used to be
Yeah.
before programmatic exists. Somebody actually had to go log into those dashboards every day. That was me. I hated it. Um,
It was so much fun.
right? It's so much fun. So now we have program, we don't have to do that anymore. But the next problems that are coming are that the gated experiences that people are going to engage with means we're going to have to go back to that same world where people may not leave that environment, and we will be back to needing to consolidate away again.
Specifically, what environment?
So,
In the
I'm
daily
gonna
work?
jump on this. So Facebook said to me, this was a couple of years ago, they're never gonna leave Facebook, and we all went, "Psh, you're crazy. You crazy. You didn't know what you're talking about." And thought about it, and I was like, no, you know what? These people convinced Amex and Discover and Visa and MasterCard to let them host the entire buying process on every website and leave you back in Facebook in the end. So if anybody's actually tried to be on Facebook and click on a ad that you see, and then you realize at some point you actually have not left Facebook, even though you have clicked on 25 shirts, put them all in your cart, took some out, changed the size, put your credit card in, said bye, closed it out, and went back to Facebook. You actually never left the Facebook experience. So I think, Julie's point where your sort of gut wants to say, this is insane, all that personal data that's in my ATS, Facebook has already convinced you to put your credit card in, your home address, your CCV number, that one on the back, all of it in the Facebook experience. So for me, after I took that moment and realized this, I was like, this actually isn't a huge leap for them to think that this is a feasible approach given the audience, right? So this is going to be the tug, right? When you work with organizations that have big audiences, the ones you want and access to volume, you may find yourself actually capitulating to some of these demands. But on the other side, you'll still work with some of these long tail where you're going to be the one in control. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how this dynamic plays out over time of where does your data live. And then if you think about the buying experience, it's not like it's not being replicated back on that corporate, limited brands website, wherever it is, still in their database. So it's really a matter of the experience being hosted, not the data itself being hosted. So your ATS will continue to be a recruiter tool that you interact with as a recruiter that allows you to continue to follow compliance and all the rules and the business and the approvals and all that good stuff. But the candidate experience may in fact leave over time your ATS itself.
Examples: LinkedIn apply, Indeed apply, Zip
Yeah.
apply. All of these things to make it very easy for the candidate, which is wonderful, increases volume. But you need to make sure that your company is adapting to those easy methods. Make your job easier, you'll get more candidates.
But you
Question?
may not want more.
Very prevalent, at starting in Europe. Seat is the biggest offender of what you said.
Mhm.
They have a monopoly.
Yep.
Candidates do not leave seat from 51 jobs, so it's very prevalent and it's moving.
Yeah, you see, and it's interesting because the U.S. Everything's a pendulum. The U.S. in some ways has a maturity curve that's earlier for a lot of things, um, but the European job boards specifically were quicker to say no, we're not going to let the candidate exit. Now, again, this creates more challenges, right? This is in their business interest, but as I mentioned earlier, right, they want to take that candidate, the one you want, and they want to give it now to all of your friends. Here's Mary. She's lovely. You guys are all going to love her. Every one of you is going to love her. So how do you as a company, knowing that you have this new barrier in front of you, how do you adapt to be faster? It's really about faster, right? Speed wins.
So, I mean, on that note, wouldn't it make sense for ATS vendors to start adopting programmatic into their own?
You would think that would be a great idea. I would love that idea. I think that it's interesting. So Bullhorn. So I spent a number of years at an ATS. And one of the things that was really clear to me is that it's not the thing they focus on yet. It's still not the thing they focus on yet, right? There's so many challenges for the recruiter themselves in their day-to-day operating life and getting just sort of that whole thing wrangled. It hasn't been the thing that companies yell about yet. Or if they yell about it, they don't yell about it in a way that that ATSs are thinking about the solution. So until the operators of the ATSs are sort of raising their fists and saying, "You guys have to deal with this," they're distracted with a lot of other things.
Directly counter, that directly is against what you just said, because enterprises can be so slow to adapt to all these new marketplaces or whatever. It's gonna be very hard for that to take off. No?
Yes. Oh no, I get it. But I think what will happen is the programmatic piece or this thing or both are going to, so like for us, when we look at the world, we don't care if you use Indeed Apply or LinkedIn Apply, we track all of that too. So it's not a big deal how you do that. So it allows programmatic to operate outside of the.
Walled garden concept, I think it's gonna be very hard to take off. And I'm curious.
I mean, you say that, but can we just talk about my friends at Craigslist who have built the most incredible business on a
For real.
incredible. I'm sorry. If
Craigslist.
anyone would like a beer later, like this, I could go on for hours on Craigslist. I'm fascinated by it. I'm glad to know you are too. It sounds like the only one.
Yes, absolutely.
So, rough market estimates, they'll do about $1 billion this year in job advertising.
Right? It's shocking. It's shocking. And guess what? It works. It works.
Sometimes.
Done
right.
We're not gonna hire doctors on Craigslist.
But they are the quintessential version of a walled garden. They talk to nobody. They work with no one. They're not friendly. They don't even let you walk into their building and give them a check. You have to just hand it to like a weird window and walk away. Right? They are this walled garden, and they still have figured out how to thrive. But I think overall, like I happen to be a fan of collaboration and make it all talk together. And so I'm biased in all of this. But I think that this is going to be an interesting dynamic. I mean, that's the reality of it. It's going to be who yells louder. Is it the companies? Is it the job sites? Who owns the candidate? There's a lot of questions around that. Who writes the check?
That's the way it's always been, right? It's always been the employer. But now it's a job seeker's world. I'm actually thrilled about that because nobody's cared about the user experience to the candidate in forever. No, nobody ever talked about it until a couple of years ago. People started to care about the candidates.
Do you guys mystery shopper your own jobs? Anybody mystery shopper your own jobs? Do you actually be the ones doing it, or do you like outsource it to someone else? You do it, right? Like one of the best experiences you could do is apply for your own job, like not yourself, but like one of your other recruiters, and time yourself. How long does it take you to apply for this job on a mobile device? How long does it take for them to get back to you? Do your automated responses look like automated responses? Start to like actually benchmark your own behavior as a business. You'd be surprised. Some of the better things that I've seen are companies that bifurcate their apply process. So it's almost like marketing in this case, right? Where you ask for a minimal amount of information and then you follow up and ask for more as you need it. It's almost like just in time, right? So get the person's information enough for you to say yay or nay on the job for a first step. If it's a yay, then that kicks off a next process and you get the rest. Well, no names here, but of course I have seen the fabulous application that included, I want your social security number, I want your references.
Doesn't it say like the number one thing not to do online is to give out your social security number? So how many candidates are dropping off in that process, right?
And you can
That's-
measure that and you can actually use that as data. But a lot of times what you hear is like, well, they have to pass a background check. So I have seen this done, which I think is really clever, which is just say, you will have to pass a background check. You'd be surprised how many people then your completion rate of background check by just telling them it's going to happen. Just that information. So you can change the process without necessarily breaking things, but try not to ask for social security numbers in the first process. It's kind of like, hello, we're going to date now. I would like to know, like it's your first date. Like, hi, I would like to know how many children you plan on having and what are your hours? I need to know exactly how much you've made the last 45 years. I did apply for a job the other day and it required that I had 3 former companies in order to apply for the job. It was a low skill job. I was like, well, what about all the people that are like, what's that? Yeah, but this is the problem, right? Like, this is funny that we aren't thinking about these things. And a lot of it is actually the ATSs. At the end of the day, you talk to companies and they say things like, well, they'll only let me have 1 apply track, this ATS. And these aren't small ATSs. These are big guys that are like, I can only have 1 apply track, or I can only have 2 apply tracks. So everybody has to go through either my professional track or my my hourly track. And this is where we talk about CRM, right? A lot of times a hosted career site and CRM can do wonders for your business just because it sort of separates out a lot of that craziness that the ATSs have created.
And that was something that we did during our campaign as well, was utilizing lead generation forms that we put like a vanity URL in a lot of our brand awareness media like Facebook or billboards, et cetera, that just drove the job seeker to a really simple form that just said, hey, I need your name, your email, what location are you looking for a job in that you saw our ad in, and what, I think we asked for a resume if they had one as optional. And then we got a lot more candidates from responding to billboards or Pandora ads or things like Facebook where they're not in apply mode at that time, but they are interested in a job. And then we sent them like an automated email with a follow-up link to the actual apply form. And that was a way that we were able to kind of capture those leads of people who are interested, but they maybe weren't in application mode when they saw our brand awareness media.
Has anyone implemented text to apply? And I don't mean where you follow up and stalk people and tell them to show up at your interview. I mean where you say, I'm interested in this job. Tell me your name. Okay, tell me your email. Tell me your phone number. And it's all through a back and forth. Yeah, you've done this.
Chatbot experience.
Yeah. Do you like that, or did it work?
It worked to get inbound, but then the engagement fell sharply, so you gotta have a good team.
Is it texting or was it on? I was on the texting because I've seen a lot of companies be fairly successful for the skilled and hourly space to do well with that for restaurant workers, retail workers, oil rig workers. That's a really good one, actually, weirdly. The nursing,
Really nursing.
because they are just more willing to come back, and there's gaps in it. You'll see the time gaps, but most of the data suggests that it's an over 60% response rate in the texting engagement. So if you can adopt that in your process, it's very effective. You have to be careful. It also has a double-edged sword, right? Companies want to use it to, this is my favorite one, avoid ghosting. Oh, well, I want to remind them so they don't ghost. And it does work. You can limit ghosting on interviews. I just have to ask the question, is that what you want? Because if they're going to ghost you on the interview, don't you kind of assume they're going to ghost you on the job too? So maybe ghosting early is better. I don't know. So think about that, but I do see that being very effective at getting people to show up to their interviews and so forth. Have you
Yeah,
guys
it's
done that or
engagement.
no?
Yeah, we're just starting that. Yeah, we just went through a texting for recruiting RFP process.
Cool. Other questions?
Mentioned Pandora, how are you using that?
Yeah, so we were doing a bunch of brand advertising on there. So as job seekers were driving in their car and they were listening to it, or if they were like on their phones, we were doing advertising on the free channel. So it would pop up and say, hey, are you interested? Our warehouses are hiring or our call centers are hiring. And job seekers could click on the ad and it would take them to that landing page. They could just fill out their name. And then we would follow up with an email saying, hey, thanks so much for submitting your information. Here's the apply form for the job you're interested in. And so that was something that actually Recruitics thought of as we were looking toward our peak season campaign of what were some other interesting ways that we could shake loose, passive and active job seekers in those markets, as a lot of our warehouses are in highly competitive markets with our peers. And so that was a way that we thought we could kind of break through the noise as people are commuting home.
Yeah, Pandora, Spotify, iHeartRadio, those
Mhm.
are all great influential ways to catch an audience when they are not thinking about jobs, but influence them to
Mhm.
think about them.
A lot of those for professionals too are people will use those as their music station. So it's actually a better one than Facebook in some ways for professional recruiting, because there is enough people who will listen to it at midday, and then noon on Monday shows up, everybody's favorite time for you to get a job. Cool. Other questions? Good. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. Thank you, ladies. You guys are amazing.
Yeah, this was a great group. Great questions came out from the audience too. Appreciated that.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
People want to hang around and ask questions. I don't know if you're willing to hang out for a little. So for those of you who would like to ask questions of our panelists or just interact with each other, they're willing to stick around for a little while. I hope you all can too. There's hopefully still beer out there to be had before you leave. Thank you, Wayfair, for hosting us once again, and look for more events from BATSA in 2020.
I'll hug it out. How are